All right, so I've never been much of a reader. I was always like the Cliff Notes kind of person in school. Now and again, I would find something that intrigued me that I would actually like to read for enjoyment, but I've always been more of a TV person until this year. In the past year, I have read or listened to 47 books. I looked, and prior to that, I've read about 6 in the past 5 years since my kids have been born. So this was a big year for me, and it's been so much fun. I feel like I've unlocked this whole new world and this new side of self-care for me. Coming from somebody who has always been a self-help business book person exclusively, I feel like I've unlocked this new level with reading fiction this year, and that is most of what I've consumed. It's interesting how it's impacted my creative work and just allowed me to open up and know that in sharing and being that there's a lot of value in there, because my businessy brain would normally say that it needs to be this businessy book that's productive, but there is productivity in reading these stories and immersing yourselves in these worlds and resting and just living life. And I think that's a big thing that I'm taking into 2025 is like life is about living and being and learning and, being able to support along the way. And I just think the support can look different than maybe we thought it had to look. So I'm just so excited to get to come in and recap all of the different things that I've read in this journey of leaving behind the business and the self-help books as I've been tuning into myself more and being able to share that with you and maybe help you dip your toes into a whole new world too. So this is what I've read. I read most of my stuff on Kindle, either getting it through Libby, or I'm going to talk later about finding Kindle Unlimited. I mostly read on my Kindle because it's just easier for me in the middle of the night, or I'm listening. So not really physical books. This is kind of my story to getting to where I am today. And these books might not be your flavor, but it might be fun to just hear what I've tried out and find some that are your flavor. Okay, what I feel are the perfect intros, the perfect crossovers, almost like tricking your brain by reading fiction, but it feeling like you're still in that productive self-help world. And that first one is Midnight Library. I absolutely loved this book. I thought it was so cool how he wove the story together. It keeps you guessing. I read this one. It kept me engaged. And it does leave you feeling like you've bettered yourself and that you have a new perspective on life. And so I feel like that is a great one for people like us who come from the self-help and the business world, and we look to reading as a productive task. And if we're not doing something productive, we get super anxious about it and we're like, oh, this is a waste of my very limited time. So this one felt like that perfect starter book for me that was like easing into the waters and going from just dipping my toes into reading more into maybe I can read something different. So once I started that, I then was suggested this author named Emily Henry. And she kind of reminds me of back in the day when I did read a few books and kind of dive into some authors' fictional worlds. Lauren Weisberger was big at the time, and she is the writer of The Devil Wears Prada, and then she had a handful more, and I was in the fashion industry at the time. And so Emily Henry kind of reminds me of her, kind of similar vibes. This is a very rom-com-y book, definitely more for an adult. And so I started with The Happy Place. And that one, again, was like a really good one where it made you think. It made you think about life and being happy and some of the questions come back to your own life. It also made me super frustrated, like, just do the thing. And so that started me down a binging rabbit hole. I then consumed any and everything I could get from Emily Henry. I have now read all of her books, and she has more coming out, and they're on my saved list on Goodreads, which I just got, and I wish I would have gotten at the beginning of my journey here, because I saw that in Kindle that it was like, add to your Goodreads profile. I'm like, I don't know what that is. Well, now I've had to go back at the end of this year and add in all of the books and the audiobooks I've listened to. And so as you start this journey, I would recommend checking out Goodreads and make us tracking what you're reading and kind of rating it and knowing your sentiments about it so much easier. And then I also went on to binge. Matt Haig is the author of The Midnight Library. He also wrote a book called How to Stop Time. I listened to that one. It was not my favorite, but I loved Midnight Library so much that I wanted to give another one of his a try. And unfortunately, that one just wasn't a fit for me. So after I binged a bunch of Emily Henry and also had to wait on Libby. Libby is that app from the library where you can read books for free, but sometimes you have to wait in line just like the normal library for the hold to be available. So then I was starting to talk with one of my best friends, Taylor, who has always been a reader. We've been best friends since we were 5 years old, and she always read a ton of books, and I always thought that was so cool, but it was just never me. Now we have this new way to bond because we're both reading these kind of books as we stepped into motherhood, and we just need a little different release, and so we're reading a bunch of fiction. And she recommended Taylor Jenkins Reid. Specifically, she first recommended for me One True Loves, and it was so good that I then went and binged everything I could get my hand on. And, it took some time to get all of her books and read them all. And I actually listened to most of hers, which is great because hers are very well produced. And this is when I started to listen to audiobooks and trying that. A lot of the Emily Henry ones I had read. When I moved from One True Loves to Daisy Jones, amazing, transformed my life. Before I consumed everything, it turned into an Amazon series. But Daisy Jones was the first fiction book that I listened to, and it changed the game for me. Most of Taylor Jenkins Reid's audiobooks are fully produced. So Daisy Jones was an example where there are multiple characters. It's really cool. It's actually a book written in like a VH1 behind the scenes documentary style. And so the audiobook actually had different voice actors for each of the characters. It had like sound effects. There's one called Carrie Soto. And in that one, it's all about a tennis player. And so like when they talk about the sports media, they have like a kind of ESPN sound and like newscasters. So really, this is when it took me to another level of I've always been a TV person, and now I have the opportunity while I'm cleaning my house or the kids are playing or whatever to get to watch TV, but I'm just like listening to TV. And so that was transformative for me. Once I started listening, not only did I binge every single one, Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, Malibu Rising, Forever Interrupted, maybe in another life, they were all so good. And she has another one coming out soon that I am so pumped about. And so that's really when my journey transitioned from not just reading and not just starting to like fiction, but being fully down the rabbit hole. So then Taylor recommended Abby Jimenez, and I started her first series called Part of Your World. It's 3 books. You don't have to read them in order, but if you do, then all the storylines combine. And I started it, and I was just kind of like, about it. At this point, her writing was kind of similar to Emily Henry's, and I started to hear a bunch of kind of the same plot lines, the same stories happening over and over again. Not to the point of like a Hallmark movie, which I'm going to get to in some other series that I've read, but I just was like, okay, yeah, this is kind of same. Until I got to the end of that series, and the end of the Part of Your World series, all of the books come together and like blew my mind. And that is when I officially fell in love with Abby Jimenez's writing. So I went to find her next book on Libby. And sometimes when I can't find it on Libby or I'm waiting, I'll download a sample on Kindle just to kind of mark what I want next. This is before I knew about Goodreads and saving what I want to read. And when I did, it turned out that her second series, the Friend Zone series, is all on Kindle Unlimited, which at some point I got Kindle Unlimited to get some business books, and I don't even know where I'm paying this subscription for, but I have it, and I was like, I am going to get to read all of these now. And so I read all of the Friend Zone series, 3 more books, loved it. Those ones I did read. That then led me to this thing that they're doing on Kindle, and it's these short story series. And from the businessy side of me, it is super smart. So Abby Jimenez, along with 5 other authors, got together. I'm assuming that they all came out around Valentine's Day. They were all a Valentine's Day story, but they were all short stories. So it only took me about an hour to 2 hours to read them. But then I was exposed to all of these other authors who are similar style, who had really good stories. And I loved how easy it was to consume those. They were just short bite size. I felt really accomplished after I would finish one. I think in one day I finished like 2 of the short stories, which is like, I finished 2 books in one day. Who am I? So I loved it. And then I've since found Under the Mistletoe, which is 5 more books. And that's when I realized that when you get the books from Kindle Unlimited, you also unlock them on Audible for yourself. So I finished almost the entire Under the Mistletoe short stories series in about 2 days while I've been making our kids their lofted beds. And again, they're only like almost 2 hours to listen to. And so they're super easy to pop in your earbud, hear the story. And again, I feel super accomplished when I finished it. So that was that journey. There are other stories that were dispersed in there, but I've broken them up into 2 more categories. And the first one is for my Gilmore Girls lovers. These are books that, first off, the first one was recommended to me because it was billed on Instagram and TikTok as Gilmore Girls meets practical magic. And that's the unfortunate side effects of heartbreak and magic. This one I also listened to, and that also was at the beginning of learning, like, I can listen to these fiction books and it's like watching TV. And I remembered I listened to that one when I was actually planting my garden, and it was, universal perfect timing because a lot of the story talked about gardening in the plot line as well. I could see a teensy tiny bit of why they said Gilmore Girls. I definitely think it was like 98% like practical magic and 2% like Gilmore Girls. But I appreciated the book in itself, and I'm glad that it dipped my toes into another world. I'm not normally like a fantasy type of person, and this was more like witchy magic, but it opened me and exposed me to wanting to try other books in that realm. And so that was one that was billed for Gilmore Girls. I then, through Substack, came across The Pumpkin Spice Cafe. Another Substacker had recommended this book that they had read, and I put it on my list, and I fell in love with it, and it surprised me. It is a super easy read. I equate her writing to like watching a Hallmark movie. And I've never actually watched a Hallmark movie, but it's just like my vibe of it. It's like kind of cheesy, super easy to watch, lighthearted. You know from the beginning where the story's going in the end, but there is some nice little twists in it. And it's just a really fun and easy and happy read. So Pumpkin Spice Cafe is the first in her Dream Harbor series. It's the town that it's set in. It is like reading Gilmore Girls. Like, it is straight up so similar. The remaining 2 are in the works. I think one comes out maybe around February and the other one around June of 25. So I'm waiting on those ones. But I really, really enjoyed those. And yeah, if you're a Gilmore Girls lover and you want something just like so easy to read, all of Laurie Gilmore's books in that Dream Harbor series, they're great. And then, of course, I have to mention that I did listen to The Third Gilmore Girl by Kelly Bishop. It was her book that she wrote and told about the story of her life and Gilmore Girls, and it was good. So I started the year with dipping my toes in, kind of doing my normal routine. I read a couple of parenting books, Wild and Free. That's a lot about homeschooling as we were starting to really step into our unschooling journey. Hunt, Gather, and Parent. It was meh for me. And then I moved into Big Magic, which I loved, of course. Just a beautiful, beautiful book if you haven't read it yet. And then 10X is Easier Than 2X came out. It really overlaps a lot with the slow living concept of do less in what you do it with all of your effort. So then that, of course, as these books tend to do, then went down a rabbit hole, and I went to another one that had been written called The Gap in the Gain. Again, another good businessy book, but this was just me dipping my toes into reading more. I then found on Pinterest, of all places, which is super interesting. I've now found a ton of books on Pinterest, but this amazing book called Quiet Marketing. And this is really my beginning to shift away from businessy content into my slower paced life. And I really enjoyed this book. The look of this physical book is what attracted me. It was just a beautiful light green linen bound book, and when I dug into it, it was a really quick, short read, but helped me to just keep leaning into this slow living life more. That, along with The 4-Hour Workweek, which I actually recently read, and that was really for research. And then I actually listened to Spare, which is about Prince Harry, and was just like dipping my toes into this other world other than self-help. The Creative Act. This was another one that I actually had to do in combo. I have the physical book, I got the Kindle version, and I have it on Audible. And it was almost like I couldn't look straight at it. I had to take it in a ton of bite-sized pieces, but I just agree with everything he has to say. And I thought it was just such a beautifully well-written book. Now that is, while it is like kind of businessy, it's just different. It's just a different world. So again, if you need to kind of dip your toes into this world, it might be another good bridge book. But also I found myself like just having to take it in really tiny bite-sized steps. So the last few that I fell in love with out of these 47 books that I've consumed this year, one of my favorites is called Nora Goes Off Script. It is just this great story about a woman, and she's a writer. And I started reading this one right when I started to get into Substack and dive into my creative world and writing. And so I related with that. She has her own backyard studio, which is so funny that I'm eventually going to have a different type of studio, one that will be in our backyard. And I thought that was synchronistic to just hear about her creating there. And I loved that one. I also read The Sweetest Revenge, and the plotline is very similar. If I had to choose between the two, Nora Goes Off Script is my top one. But The Sweetest Revenge was good too. Very similar plotline, another writer, love story. The last two, How to End a Love Story, was another great one I listened to, and that was over the summer as well while I was gardening. I remember thinking there were a lot of good twists and turns. That was also another writer story. All the ones in this category was about TV writers. I really enjoyed it and would love to hear more of her work as well. And then the last one was recommended by my friend Brenda, and I listened to this one. It was so good. Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers. I had not read anything that was kind of like sleuthy yet, and I just love this one. Like Vera Wong, that character is amazing. She's strong, she's funny, she's smart. She was great. She was so great. And I loved how you got bits and pieces of the story, and then you would have to wait to uncover more and more, and the twist at the end was great. And I just really enjoyed that one. So that is a recap of the 47 books that I have read this year, with ones that transitioned me into this space of now just wanting to curl up with a fiction book for most of my time and read all of these different worlds and stories and just be able to immerse myself in a different space. It has had me think of, gosh, I wish I could write. I wish this would inspire me to write a fiction book, but I don't know if I'm ever going to be that type of writer or creator, maybe one day. But at the very least, I am enjoying myself, and I can't wait to share next year or maybe next quarter when I've consumed some more books that I'm just so excited to share with you about.